I'm sick of being hunted and hounded. I'd rather be with you than against you. So whether you like it or not, I'm joining the... Hey, what are you calling yourselves? It should be something colorful and dramatic, like the Avengers. Today on the Comic Book Report, the Avengers Omnibus Volume 1. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm back for another Marvel Omnibus review. This time, of course, we're taking a look at the Avengers Omnibus. This is the Volume 1 that kicks off our favorite superhero team. This is coming all the way back from the Silver Age of comics. Now today I am reviewing an older printing of this omnibus. This was reprinted last year. I believe it's still in print at the time of this recording. Part of the reason I'm going through this is that I did get volumes 2 through 5 of Avengers that I hope to review in the future, so of course we're going to start here. Before we dive in though, I do want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking for your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see something you like, you can even use my discount code, TheComicBookReport, at checkout to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate code or link to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's the best way you can support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's Marvel Omnibus review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Stan Lee and illustrated primarily by Jack Kirby and Don Heck. The comics in this volume were first published by Marvel Comics beginning in 1963. The volume itself collects Avengers issues 1 through 30. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover format with glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 744 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at today's omnibus. As I mentioned, this is an older printing of this omnibus, so the newer printing will have, in some cases, a different dust jacket design, especially at the spine. It'll have the smaller print face as well as the little picture window like you see with a lot of the other reprints we've been getting from Marvel's Silver Age. So this whole book will look a little bit different, but it has the same contents for all intents and purposes as far as those first 30 issues. So one of the reasons I wanted to review this today, again, because I got the other editions, volumes 2 through 5, that I'm going to be making my way through, and I wanted to make sure I had a review for this first volume, especially while the reprint is still in print, because for you, even though this is a little bit different because it's an older printing, you'll still get a good idea if it's something you'd like to purchase. The back cover of this omnibus, you have the thumbnails of all 30 issues included in today's collection. Really love this. This is primetime Silver Age for me. It's a great Marvel team book. I cannot wait to discuss it with all of you. This is actually one of my oldest omnibuses I have in my collection, but this is the first time I've actually made my way all the way through. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and show you the full dust jacket as well as the under the dust jacket for this collection. Again, I just want to remind everyone that this is an older printing, so even what we have under the dust jacket is likely quite a bit different from the new reprint. This is back in the days when Marvel Omnibus editions, especially these old Silver Age books, kind of had a faux leather feeling hardback book. It had that less kind of plasticky feeling we get with the newer reprints. Again, they went for this full kind of faux leather feel to the hardback books themselves, as well as the kind of embedded silvered printing we have on this omnibus, the actual hardback book itself. So this is just an older style of omnibus. This is also a bit thicker than you'll see the volume 1 reprint. That's largely due to the thicker paper stock from these older printings. Over the years, Marvel seems to have gotten thinner and thinner paper for these omnibus editions. It does make their omnibuses less bulky, but sometimes you have some bleed through on the pages. Not so much a problem here with this older edition. What is, however, a problem with mine, the binding is a bit worse for wear on this collection. It's very, very stiff. It doesn't lay out perfectly. When it does, it lays out very flat, but the binding, it's just not super loose. I didn't properly stretch or store this volume, so after having it for over a decade, it's just a little bit wonky as far as the binding. With that out of the way, though, let's go ahead and jump into the collection itself. I will say the kind of marbled silver end pages, I believe, is also a remnant of this older printing. I don't believe the reprint has those either. After that, though, we have the title pages, publication information, a full table of contents, and a nice introduction before jumping into the main issues in this book. So this omnibus keeps it pretty simple. We have the first 30 issues of that Avengers title. No annuals, no crossovers, no tie-ins or anything, just a straight issues 1 through 30. And honestly, it is so very refreshing. Another thing I love, like I mentioned, is a total page numbered table of contents at the beginning. This is pretty standard for Silver Age Marvel omnibuses, and yet I still want to commend it. I love an omnibus you can easily index and kind of map and jump around exactly where you want to go. But this is, again, the start of Avengers, this big superhero team that we've come to know and love. Of course, there were decades upon decades of fans already, but with the advent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think more people than ever before know about this team, and it all gets its start in these pages. The initial roster, I believe, is something like Thor, Ant-Man, the Wasp, Iron Man, and the Hulk. We do have the roster changing quite a bit, even within this first volume. We have characters like Captain America arrive, as well as Quicksilver, the Scarlet Witch, and Hawkeye. We have some of the other aforementioned members leaving the team, and so we're already getting kind of the juggling and sort of revolving door format that we'll come to see with Avengers as a team. I like to make this distinction when comparing it to something like Fantastic Four, which is ostensibly just the Thing, Mr. Fantastic, Human Torch, and the Invisible Woman. Yes, we do have some change-ups in that roster as well, but it's fewer and farther between. Avengers, right from the outset, is kind of established as this sort of revolving door set of teammates that basically will come together to form the Avengers. Some of them are always kind of thought of as maybe on reserve, or they'll come in when they're needed. But because of that, this book feels a bit fresher than some of the other team books out there, because we have a lot of different character dynamics, and with the ability for some of these characters to show up or disappear at really any time that the authors kind of feel like it, it can really just lend to some interesting situations, which I really liked. As far as this book goes, though, the Hulk doesn't last in this team very long. He has a couple notable appearances, to be sure, but he's really only in it for maybe, a couple issues. Thor, Iron Man, the Ant-Man, and the Wasp, along with Captain America, who arrives in issue 4, they're definitely more mainstays for the first maybe half-ish of this book, before we have a big team change, where we lose Iron Man, Thor, Ant-Man, and Wasp in favor of Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Hawkeye. So there is a point where the 4 main Avengers are really Captain America, Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver. We do have Ant-Man and Wasp kind of come back in toward the end of the book as well, but this is what I mean. We have this revolving roster even within these first 30 issues. I really, really like it for what we're getting here, though. Like I said, this series started in 1963, so we're primetime Silver Age, and yet it's not the earliest of the Marvel boom, and I really like that because you can already tell it feels a bit fresher than some of those earlier Marvel titles. I can definitely tell that Stan the Man Lee is really settling into the voices of a lot of these characters, and he's kind of getting this idea of how he wants this shared universe to go. Within these issues, we even have appearances from Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom, and so many other kind of familiar faces around the Marvel Universe. Spider-Man, of course, shows up a little bit. It's just a really great book, and I really love how it established this superhero team. I love how it brought back Captain America from his golden age years. We have him retrieved from a block of ice, and he's dealing with a lot of kind of post-traumatic stress trauma after losing Bucky and kind of falling into the ocean. I really thought that that was pretty profound, because I don't know how much post-traumatic stress was really delved into back in this day, especially in pop culture like in comic books, but you definitely feel like he's haunted by his past in many ways, losing his dearly loved comrade in Bucky Barnes. I really, really like that. I think Captain America started really tragic and has just a striking contrast to a lot of the other characters, at least how he's presented in this book. He really quickly becomes the natural leader of the Avengers, at least in this omnibus, and I really enjoyed it for that. I also just think it's really fun that in these early issues, no one really knows each other's secret identities. Of course, there are a few exceptions, but like nobody knows that Iron Man is actually Tony Stark. We know Tony Stark is funding the Avengers headquarters and all their tech, but we just think that he's this nice benefactor. We don't really realize that he's on the team as Iron Man. I mean, of course, we do as the audience reading it, but I mean, these other characters have no idea. Same with Ant-Man and Wasp. No one knows their civilian identities. Captain America is maybe the rare exception where everyone knows who he is. But anyway, it's a fascinating setup, and I love that we even have this notion of secret identities in the beginning for many of these players. It's something we don't always see across the Marvel Universe, of course here and there, but in Avengers you'd think there'd be a little bit more broadcasting of that information amongst the team, and I kind of like that it wasn't. Another thing I really enjoyed about this book is because, again, it's back in the Silver Age, so it's very, very common that these issues would be very episodic in nature. What do I mean by that? I mean, this really happened before we had these grand narratives, multi-issue story arcs, or even a creator's just epic run that's all one big story arc. And yet, I was surprised to see we had a good handful of issues that were maybe 2 or 3 part storylines, which was really fascinating to see this early on in the Silver Age. Really, really loved that. I thought that these issues were really gripping, and I like feeling like we had a full arc across a couple of issues. In addition to that, we also had a lot of recurring villains or ideas show up throughout this omnibus, which I also think was really unique. It was less so the villain of the week and more so these forces of evil would keep coming with new plots and the Avengers would keep having to stop them. Some of the main players when I'm talking about this are like Baron Zemo, we have the Enchantress, we have a couple of these other characters that are recurring villains that seem to go out of their way to try to stop the Avengers at every turn. They kind of have new schemes for how to do so as the story unfolds. And I really liked that. I love this idea that we have these returning villains that are always kind of menacing this group. There are a couple others that occur throughout this book that kind of keep coming back. Kang the Conqueror is another great one that makes a lot of notable appearances even in this first omnibus. But I just do really enjoy that. I think my time reading a lot of Silver Age Avengers, we would have recurring villains, but I felt like it was less common to have these multi-issue story arcs and to have these villains show up with such a pronounced presence throughout. It was almost like the episodic villain of the week was a more rarity in the scope of this omnibus, or at least that's how it read to me, and I think in that way it felt a little more modern than when this was dated, and I really loved it for that. Now, I do want to go ahead and transition to talking about the art for a moment. This whole omnibus essentially has 2 primarily illustrators throughout it. We have Jack Kirby, and then we have Don Heck. So we kick off this omnibus with the art from Jack the King Kirby, who is really hard to top, obviously. I really like these issues. They started really strong. But that being said, I didn't know Don Heck's illustrations as well, but I've come to really love his style. He really sold me on the Avengers, and I think overall there is a great sense of action and just immersion with some of the illustrations from Heck. I really felt like I was just absorbed into the scene. I think he was very, very good at detailing facial expressions in a way I found to be very gripping. I think everything felt loud and sound effect heavy, and again, I was just really immersed in these worlds he created visually. Love the coloring. It's just really classic comic book art. Again, when I think of comic book art, my go-to knee-jerk reaction is to just see pictures of the Silver Age of comics. So for me, this is just prime, nostalgic, wonderful era of comic book history. And looking through this, I'm just really thankful that we live in a time that these omnibuses exist, that we have such great kind of archival, reprinted issues from all the way back in the 60s. It's such a joy to revisit these issues and in some cases really explore it for the first time for me. I had only read a handful of these issues prior to really sitting down and committing to finish this so that I can start making my way through this run. And honestly, I was really not disappointed. Stan Lee really hit it home for me. Admittedly, I am a fan of his, but I think I expected this to feel a bit more stilted or awkward as I was making my way through, and yet I found it to be very, very fluid and just easy to just turn the page and continue to read these adventures. I say that with kind of perspective in mind. These are still Silver Age comics, so we don't have a lot of modern storytelling convention. You can definitely tell the age. I'm not trying to get away from that. These are very much Silver Age comics, but I think for the Silver Age, and even for Stan Lee's Marvel Silver Age, I think that this feels very fresh and faster paced. I also think because we have this ensemble cast of characters and we're not just following one primary hero, these issues just move faster for me, because by the time we check in with Thor, then Iron Man, then Ant-Man, then Captain America, then Wasp, they each have a couple bits before the issue's really over. And because of that, I felt like it was just really, again, a much faster pacing, which for the Silver Age was a really big win for me. I really, really love it, and I don't think it sacrificed great character moments. I think we got to see a ton of them. I had the aforementioned situation with Captain America, where he's dealing with a lot of past trauma, especially losing his partner Bucky Barnes. We even have the young Rick Jones, the pal of the Hulk, kind of showing up and becoming the new kind of protege of Captain America. We have him being really resistant to that, but he's still a presence throughout as well. Rick Jones and his teen brigade. At any rate, it's just really fun to see these kind of conflicts and interesting character development moments for the hero like Captain America, who's dealing with his own past. I also like the dysfunction in this team. They don't always get along super great. They don't always trust each other to maybe the extent they need to, and yet they always come together and deliver where necessary. When we have the changing of the guard and we have a lot of the kind of first run Avengers leaving for, of course, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Hawkeye, it's a bit of a change-up. We have Captain America feeling even more like a fish out of water, and yet stepping up to the mantle of leadership. What's really fascinating is that all three of those newcomers were at one time kind of villains within the Marvel Universe, and here they are reformed and becoming full-fledged heroes on this Avengers team. I really like that dynamic as well. I think that that's a really unusual and fun twist in a comic book, especially in this age of storytelling. And yet we do have these heroes, and they're really not anti-heroes. They're full-fledged heroes at this point, and I think that's really great to see. One of the things I do like, though, is that Hawkeye, Clint Barton, has a major chip on his shoulder, especially when it comes to kind of following Captain America's orders. There's this feeling that he kind of really thinks he should be the leader for a lot of this, and he just really locks horns with Captain America throughout. We do have some growth with that relationship, though, by the end of this omnibus, which even that is really fun to see. But why I bring that up, though, is I think that something Stan Lee really brought to the Silver Age of comics, and I could be wrong, there could be others that really brought this, is that I think a lot of his characters had a bit more flaws. They were a bit easier to engage with. They felt more familiar. And I think I see that when I look at a team book that has some dysfunction. And again, Hawkeye and Captain America's relationship is a really good example of that. They did not really get along. There's a lot of contention between these two, and I like seeing that conflict play out across the issues. It wasn't everyone just saying, yes, for justice, yay, punch, boom, save the world. Even though some of that stuff would happen, it came out of a place of a dysfunctional team in many cases, or people really working out their own personal problems, and I loved that. I also just really think it's cool to see the variety we get as far as not only the heroes, but the villains. Like I said, we have a lot of great returning ones, like Zemo and the Enchantress, to name a few, Kang the Conqueror, but we also got a lot of great just one and done or a couple issue appearances like Doctor Doom. We got some really cool like aliens from different planets. The list goes on and on. Atuma, Namor, the Hulk showing up, kind of being more menacing. It's just a really, really fun just sequence of villains and conflicts. And I just think it gave me just a lot more than I expected reading this book. I tried to come in with really even expectations and trying to remember what I had felt about this series with the few issues I had read before really committing to reading this whole omnibus. But yeah, it just exceeded all my expectations. I think immediately this is one of my more favored Silver Age comic picks. I don't think it's dethroned the Amazing Spider-Man run or the Fantastic Four run by Stan Lee, but it's honestly up there. I think because it has a bit of that faster pacing as we juggle around all of these ensemble characters, and the fact that we get so much variety and yet we get some consistent villains and story arcs and ideas, I just think it really sets itself apart from a lot of the other Silver Age Marvel titles that I've had the pleasure of reading. Another thing I want to note too, just so I don't forget, is that like a lot of these other Silver Age omnibuses from Marvel, we also have the letters pages included at the end of the issues where applicable, and this is also really fun to see. I will be just fully confessional here. I will at times just kind of skim read the letters pages. I don't always stop and read every single letter and response we get, but I let my eyes kind of scan it and I pick out or skim what I can. But that being said, I did find an entry from George R.R. Martin. That's right, the author of Game of Thrones even penned a letter into the Avengers back in the 60s, being a fan, it seems like, of the comic magazine itself. Really, really fun to see that little Easter egg in this book. It definitely surprised me one night while I was reading this book. I was like, wow, is that really him? But how many George R.R. Martins are out there in the world? At any rate, that was really fun, but more than that, it's really great to see the creators kind of tag up and connect with their own audience base. I believe it's said that they actually had this audience connection and it helped steer maybe some future storylines or ideas for a lot of the Marvel writers and creators. But I love just getting to see some of these letters. It was such a cool time capsule. It's great to see what the feedback was at the time. You know, obviously in an age before the internet or a lot of ways to connect a lot of these fans, it's cool to see this central repository in the form of this letter page, and just to see what happened and how things developed, even from those letters into future issues and so forth. I just think that that's a really cool added facet to a lot of these Marvel omnibuses, especially from the Silver Age, and I just frankly thought it was worth noting. I was concerned when I read this book that I'd get a little burnt out on Avengers, and then I'd have volumes 2 through 5 just staring at me, just making me wonder how the heck am I going to get through it. But what I found instead was, again, this feeling of faster pacing and just really engaging character work. I really enjoyed my time here, and it honestly made me that much more excited to jump into these other volumes. I know down the road we get writers like Rory Thomas and Steve Englehart, all writers I thoroughly enjoy, and I've never read a lot of those subsequent Avengers issues after this omnibus either. So I can't wait to dive in. At the time of this recording, I'm actually already within Omnibus Volume 2. So if you're enjoying this and you want to see coverage on that, definitely stay tuned, stay subscribed, because I will be trying to review that as soon as I complete it. But as far as this volume goes, there are so many great hits here. I kind of did jump around. I didn't really speak to so many of the story arcs specifically, trying to leave some mystery to all of you. And just frankly, there's so many stories, it's hard to touch on them. The first outing of the Avengers, when they're formed, of course, we have them facing off against Loki. I thought that that was really fun. Again, the Marvel Cinematic Universe or MCU fan in me, I know the first villain they faced in Avengers was Loki. And I love that they kind of had that base in the comic books to begin with. So much fun. Toward the end of this omnibus as well, we have appearances from Black Widow, which was really exciting to see. There's kind of the hint of a romance between her and Hawkeye, which I thought was fascinating and fun in these issues. I also really like kind of the moments we get between Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch, and this idea that they're mutants, but they're trying to keep that on the down low. I just think it's fun to see that already baked into this early Marvel universe, that being a mutant was something to look down upon. I just think it's so just something that's so embedded in the cultural framework of the Marvel universe that even way back in the 60s, you still get this feeling like they were kind of ostracized or couldn't really disclose who they were. Like, it was fine if they were just general superheroes, but if they were to say they were mutants, they might receive prejudice. And I just think that that's really fun as well. Again, just as an X-Men fan, to see how much of that is already in the soup way back when in the early 60s. I do think it was a masterstroke to include these new characters and to do a major roster shift, even within the first couple handful of issues here. You know, by the end of this omnibus, you safely had a few issues of this new team, and I just think that was great. You established from the beginning that this is a varied roster kind of book, and I just think it really sets itself apart. And as we reach the back of this collection, as you've seen, we have some behind-the-scenes kind of promotional work, some sketches, some inked pages, some different kind of thumbnails of little covers of different things. A really fun little handful of extras at the back of this book. Nothing too crazy, but definitely a generous enough amount that you can get a better feel for the time and place of this omnibus, and you feel like you're treated to a little bit behind-the-scenes kind of look at things. Really love seeing this in the back of an omnibus, and this was honestly a great book. And even though this is a bit of an older printing, I really hope you still enjoyed my review of this omnibus. Like I said, at the time of this recording, I believe the volume 1 is still in reprint, so I highly recommend, if this sounded interesting to you, pick it up. It has all the same issues, so much of the same extras there. Definitely a book I recommend to Silver Age fans out there. And now the grade. For one of the most dynamic Silver Age comics I have ever read, with some incredible artistic talent throughout, the Comic Book Report has to give the Avengers Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics a B+. This is a must-read for all Silver Age fans in my mind, and honestly a great primer to explore some of your favorite Marvel heroes from some of their early beginnings. I love that this brought back Captain America. I love that we really get to see so many of the Marvel mainstays here as a team within the pages of this omnibus. Really love this. Honestly, this is one I'm going to remember for a long time. Cannot wait to read subsequent volumes, but let me know what you think of the Avengers Omnibus. Let me know what you think of the Marvel Silver Age in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, a comment, and maybe share it with a friend. Thank you so much, and have a good one.